Alright, we're back from racing. Bit of an odd start, filming the intro at the outro. But, I'm back, cast in the one piece, still alive. Let's see how the day went.
Nervous?
It's piss bad. I'm going to do it half down this track, I reckon. You see a leak, it's not water, it's piss.
Yeah.
It is. What's that? Nah, he's 12. He's to the right. He's the one on the left.
So we're running 12.
Not better.
1150's alright.
Karen goes.
1150, 117 mile an hour, still down. Hit the limiter again, 134. I shouldn't be, even with 3.7 gears, not at that mile an hour. I know the tyres are small, but I don't think I should be that high in RPM, so I'm going to have to go through the logs, see if that trans is slipping. So it can't be blowing further, unless I'm just not getting fluid to it.
Right, there you have it. A successful day. Car ran beautifully. Obviously I've got transmission issues, which I'll talk about a bit later on. But thanks very much to Heathcote for putting the day on. It was pretty busy. They ended up combining the day with the Marsh Rodders Club that was running the day earlier that got postponed. So it was a full house. Either way though, I got I think 6 or 7 runs in all up. All pretty good. It was an absolute mad rush to get the car ready to get there in time. I pretty much decided with a few days notice that I was actually going to race it straight after the dyno, so I had to quickly get myself some slicks. Can't find any decent sized slicks for any decent price in Australia at the moment, so I had to run circuit slicks on the back. I had issues with the wheel bearings in the front of the car that weren't really inspiring confidence to run at full speed, so I had to quickly get a set of those and change them over, which was a saga. Parts that I got were wrong, got another set they were wrong too, but ended up making it work in the end. The turbo feed that I had made in a previous video was leaking under pressure when it was hot only. That's the PTFE line, that guy there. That the actual PTFE sleeve on the inside is a little bit thinner than what it should have been, and the fittings just weren't clamping it properly, so I had to replace the line with another one last minute, so I didn't have any other fittings, and obviously I can't leak on the track at Heathcote because no one's going to be happy with that. So due to available tyres in Australia at the moment, I had to settle for some 17-inch slicks, which I kind of grabbed last minute used. Obviously, look, they're not a Mickey Thompson, it's a Nitto NTO1 circuit slick. Surprisingly, they worked really well, but I had to make some compromises. I had to get a set of 17-inch wheels to mount them because they're a 17-inch tyre, a 235/40. So the rolling diameter is a bit smaller than what I'm used to as well, which chucked the speedo out and everything, but that's not a big deal. They gripped really, really well. Running at 22 PSI, hooked up beautifully, and there's still a lot of life left in them, so I'll probably get another run out of them unless I get some better slicks beforehand. So I had a bit of an issue in the day. The place was packed when I arrived, and
car got covered in mud unloading from the trailer, and the scrutineering wouldn't let me through with all the mud on my car. So I actually had to take my wheels off the car and clean them in a puddle because they don't have any running water, and I didn't have any other way of cleaning them. So that was a fun little adventure. I had a couple of kids come up to me at Heathcote and asked me to sign their hat, which I thought was a bit weird. Obviously they've got me confused with some other bald guy that drives a fast car. Oh well, good luck to them. They've got the signature on a hat now. That's going to be it for the majority of the video. I'm just going to do a deep dive into the issues with the transmission and just go over a couple of logs. So anybody that's not interested in that, feel free to drop off now. But if you are interested in seeing some of the data and some of the next steps and plans, hang around. Technical deep dive time for those interested. This is the log file from my second last run of the day. I've chosen this one because on the last run of the day I tried shifting into fourth to see if it would help. It didn't help. The problem's easier to see on this log, so this is the one we're going to focus on. This is the duration of the entire log from when I hit record to the ends, but obviously, it's just this section in here which is interesting. So if I dive into here, this shows the burnout. This is the burnout section, and this is the actual run itself. So the problem doesn't present itself in the burnout, and it's too wavy anyway. I don't think you'd be able to see it. So I'm just going to snip this to the actual run itself. Okay, in here we've got some interesting data. So I'm just going to break down the fields that matter just to talk about. Top left, represented by this yellow trace in the top section, is the engine RPM. We also have the light blue section here, which is my throttle position, which is followed by this light blue trace. We have transmission input speed RPM, which is this yellow trace down here. Light blue in the bottom section is the gear position. Now this is an automatically shifted auto, it's not a full manual one, so this is the commanded position or the commanded gear from the computer. I put the shifter in D3 to do the run, so this is exactly what the computer is telling the transmission to do. I'm not shifting it manually. We've got down here as well, we've got the light pink, which is the transmission fluid temperature. We have up the top right, probably the last one which is interesting for this discussion, which is vehicle speed, which is light pink, presented by this trace here. Now, you'll see if I put my cursor here towards the start, this is when I'm waiting for the light to turn green. The engine is running, the car is going nowhere. So you can see I'm idling at around 800 RPM, presented here, and the vehicle speed is 0. Because the vehicle speed is 0, the transmission input speed is also 0, and the transmission slip RPM is the exact difference of what the engine and input speed is. That's the purpose of a torque converter. When the car is in gear and the engine is running, you obviously want to be able to stop the car from moving, so it will slip, and it's slipping by the speed of the engine. In an automatic car, you let off the brake a little bit, it'll start moving, because that slip is not completely disconnected. It is still pushing. Now, because I've got a high stall converter, you'll see that the slip increases. That's the torque converter doing its job again by multiplying torque to the wheels by slipping at lower RPM. The slip reduces as RPM increases. Again, that's the design. So that's okay. That's not the problem I want to talk about. What I do want to talk about is, if you have a look at, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. The first one is, if we focus on the transmission input speed, you can see pretty much when I jab the throttle, you can see that the car starts moving. We're getting up to here. 4,000 RPM, it does the 1-2 shift. So the RPM comes down, that shows that the transmission has shifted into the next gear. This is a few cells after when it actually commanded to do so, which shows that there is a bit of a delay. I expect a little bit of a delay because it is a hydraulically driven transmission. It's got to fill chambers with fluid before the actual shift will happen, so that may be normal. The one I don't really like the look of is, if you come here, this is your 2-3 shift. That's quite a while after the transmission was commanded to do that 2-3 shift. So that might indicate a slip or a problem or a hydraulic leak or some kind of problem in the transmission. That's not the problem though. It might be a symptom of it, but that's not what was causing me to be slow. This is what was causing me to be slow. And what's effectively happening here is, this is the car in third gear. when you're racing, you aim to finish your run in the 1-to-1 gear, which is third in this transmission. I want that arc to continue on its current trajectory till I hit the end of the track, or until I run out of RPM. What's effectively happened right here is something in the transmission just let go of its grip. It just stopped. And that can clearly be presented by the fact that we've got transmission input speed rising quite dramatically to 7,500 RPM from 62 in a split second, but no perceivable change in vehicle speed. Vehicle speed starts to fall away. Now, this felt to me like the car had been bumped into neutral. Obviously, it hadn't, because it happened on every single run, and the car was in D3, so it wasn't a thing, but it felt like it fell into neutral. Now, I know from this data that the problem is not the torque converter, and I can explain why that is. So this yellow trace at the top is the engine speed measured at the back of the engine by the crank sensor. This yellow trace is the transmission input speed measured on I think it's the direct drum in the transmission, which is after the torque converter. The pattern of these two shapes is almost identical, which shows me that the torque converter is putting into the transmission exactly what the engine is putting out. It's rised significantly because the load has disappeared, because it's effectively fallen out of a gear. But it's not the torque converter's problem. The torque converter is not slipping, because if the torque converter was slipping, this RPM would rise like it has. This one would stay the same. It would go on its same trajectory, or it would drop down. Because it is matching it, it's translating that power right through the torque converter, and it's slipping after the fact. The vehicle speed is measured on the back of the transmission. So between transmission input speed and vehicle speed, which you could effectively call transmission output speed, we've got a difference. There's a difference in that trend line. So that transmission is slipping somewhere. Now, I don't know why that is yet. I'm suspicious that the pump might be in poor condition. It could be a torn lip seal. It could be some kind of centrifugal buildup in the transmission. I don't know, and I won't be able to find out unless I either pay someone to go right through the transmission, which I can't afford, or put a pressure sensor in the transmission and try and gather a bit more data myself. So I've ordered a pressure sensor. That'll be here soon, and then I can get some more data and work out what's going on. I probably won't be able to replicate this on the street, so it'll either be a dyno run or it'll be another drag run to try and simulate this behavior, so I can see what's going on and actually trends transmission pressure along the same graph to see when the problem starts to occur, or if it's just there, or if it's low pressure the whole way through. Don't know, but that's the next thing I want to do. Now, while we're here looking at graphs, let's talk about some other stuff. This green line here is manifold absolute pressure. This is measured from, I suppose, absolute zero. What you are typically looking at is your manifold pressure from the atmosphere is around 100 kPa. So what I'm seeing here is, if I just average out that section here, I get an average over here. 167 kPa minus 100, you're looking at around 10 psi boost, 9.7 to 10 psi boost for this pretty much whole run, which is good. That's roughly what I was asking for. It's a good amount of boost. Everything's fine. This green wiggly line at the bottom here is my exhaust manifold back pressure measured between the engine and the turbo. It's a bit wavy because I don't have a suppressor in there, so you kind of have to average this out to get a good understanding. But again, this is an absolute sensor, so it measures from zero. So we're getting 194 kPa here. So again, minus 100, we've got roughly 94. That's about 14.5 to 15 psi of back pressure, which equates to 1.5 to 1 drive pressure ratio, which is almost spot on exactly what you'd want for a turbo setup. You don't want your drive pressure to be too high, and you don't want it to be too low, because then too low will have, I suppose, more lag than you need to have, and too high will just not make power, or it'll get too hot, or it'll explode. But 1.5 to 1 is pretty much perfect. That's what I'm getting, so everything's sized nicely there. Other stuff of interest, we've got exhaust gas temperature up the top right here in green. You can see at the peak of the run, this is getting to 825 degrees, which is pretty spicy. It's not a problem because the temperature does fall away pretty quickly, but it's spicy for a couple of reasons. And one of those reasons is because I don't have much spark advance in here. This blue trace here is my spark advance. If you look at the figure over here as I move the mouse cursor along, at the top end of the run, I'm at 12 degrees spark advance.
I could quite happily afford to put a few more degrees in. It's safe as far as spark goes, but the compromise with safe spark is it makes a bit more heat. Now, it's also safer than it was originally intended, because you can see this spark advance is slowly dropping degree by degree. And it's dropping degree by degree because this pink trace is increasing. This pink trace is the intake air temperature. It was quite high at the start of the run because it sat in the staging pits for quite a while, and it came up a few degrees. Now this is quite excessive, but I'm pulling timing after 50 degrees intake air, which is obviously presented here. It's not the end of the world. I could effectively raise this to 60 degrees before it starts pulling any timing, and that'd be perfectly fine. And then I would see a small reduction in exhaust gas temperatures as well. So nothing to worry about here. Engine temperature is presented in this green line. It hardly changed. It changed by 1 degree for the entire run. So that cooling system's working a treat. Everything's looking good there. Transmission temperature has increased from 66 to 70 by the end of the run, which also tells me it's not slipping consistently through the whole run. It's just effectively letting go. Because if it was slipping the entire run, the rate of increase of that transmission fluid temperature would be coming up quite dramatically, because it would be effectively cooking that fluid. So that's where we're at. I can't really do any more until I've got that pressure sensor, but that'll be the next video, getting that installed, getting some data and working out what to do next with the transmission. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Definitely put in the comments if you like seeing this technical deep dive stuff, or if you don't. Always looking forward to feedback. Yeah, happy to share any thoughts you have about it. But that'll do it for this video. Thanks very much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.